This is Jeremy Toman, and today on Founder at 50, my guest is Robin Raskin, one of the first female reporters in tech, receiving calls from the likes of Bill Gates. She's since spent her days as an accidental entrepreneur. Discover her story from the earliest days of PC Magazine to bringing sex tech to CES to leading virtual event strategies in the pandemic, and she's still cooking up new ideas today. Hey Robin, how are you?
Oh, it's a stifling hot day in New York City. How about you?
It is almost a stifling day in the New York suburbs, so I'm with you. I'm already sort of ready for the fall. If that's I don't
with you, or at least a little cooling at night. I'll take that for starters. But
as
good
they
to
say,
see you.
it's got a lot of the ick, is what they say. I guess I always keep up with things. Robin, our story goes back a decent ways. We've known each other not only pre-pandemic, but I think we're pre-mobile phone as the dominant way we all communicate.
I think pre-internet, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. What I'd love to do is get us started with where your career started. Where'd you go to school, and what were you doing in those early days? And then we'll get to where our paths coincide and how many times they do over the years.
Well, it's so funny. So my book, when I finally finished writing it, is literally titled "I Must Be at the Wrong Meeting," because everything about my life appears to have been accidental entrepreneur, accidental publisher, editor, television. And I'll just give you the best example is how I got started on all of this. So, okay, it is like 1979, I kid you not. And my husband, who I had just gotten married to, dating myself, brings home a DEC PDP 11 terminal, just the keyboard, hooked up to his university as like a gift to me, because he knew I wanted to be a writer more than anything. And he said, if you get rid of the typewriter and you start using this PDP, and I'll teach you Unix, and I'll teach you NROTH and TROTH, and you'll see it's going to be great because you can make edits. Meanwhile, this was so not great. So every night.
I was going to say, that sounds like a dream come true, honey. Unix,
Exactly.
like no, I don't think that's ever been said before.
Exactly. And he did it like it was his love thing. And so I'm learning this, and he brings home printouts every night. And then I kind of like type in my changes. I sold a story to Newsday. It took me about 3 months of learning computers. And, but I was so frustrated by this whole experience. And I had a new baby also, a brand new baby. And so I wrote a story for InfoWorld. If anybody remembers InfoWorld, it was a computer magazine that was really great. And I wrote a story and I turned it in because I couldn't afford therapy. So it was called How I Learned About Computers to Save Our Marriage. And it was about a guy who brought home a computer. And I said, there's nothing about this that's easy. On the other hand, there's nothing about this that's like tennis or golf or like any other sport or hobby your husband ever had. So I don't know about you women, but I'm on the program because I think for women, it's going to open up a way for us to eventually call the shots and have an opportunity to work on our own terms and maybe have some life balance. I did not know what I was talking about. I get paid $25 for this story, but I get 2 phone calls out of it that are kind of amazing. One is Bill Gates, and he says, he's like writing DOS, basically. And he goes, you really think there's going to be a computer on everybody's desk? I said, well, I kind of do, yeah. We had this little conversation. The other one was Bill Ziff, who was starting a publication in New York called PC Magazine. And I said, those 500 words you read, that's like all I know about technology, because nobody knows about technology. Can you speak English? And just come on down here. So I still had this really nice husband, and I get thrown in a room with some amazingly great, talented people who just happen to all be men. But like literally, I'm calling my husband on the phone going, they want me to test ASCII codes on printers. What's an ASCII code? And then he would tell me, and then I'd go back in, and eventually, and I think part of what I brought to it was the gift of not being a geek and being able to cross the line of making this intelligible for normal people, so that they kind of looked at me and said, this lady can do it, I can do it too. So And
And
that's
so
how I.
did that turn into a job with what was that the early days of Ziff Davis? What I was
Yeah.
an early PC Mag subscriber myself, so I'm familiar.
So I became a freelancer. So I had one little baby, I had another one on the way, and I stayed at home with the first two, but literally would get shipped laptops. That wasn't laptops, it was desktops. I mean, desktop computers to test out. I'm going to try to think of the others I tested out at home. Borland Sidekick. I mean, like really early Harvard graphics, calling these names up, and would write reviews. And so I did piecemeal. And I said, when I'm ready to come back, I would love to work here full time. And so I actually went back, and I think I started at an editorial assistant. I probably would still be an editorial assistant. But because I had so many years of writing, they thought maybe I could edit. So I became the first looks editor, which was every new product that came to market was my job to review in PC Magazine. PC Magazine at the time was a printed magazine. There was like a
Sure.
phone book that came out every 2 weeks because the world was exploding. And God bless people like Bill McCrone, Michael Miller, who worked on strict testing rules so that we could really make good product decisions. And when you won an editor's choice, it really meant something. We had a fabulous lab that we invested all kinds of money into, and that we tested everything. And so it was a heady time to be in the industry. Literally, when we started this magazine, we walked floppy disks around from machine to
Sure.
machine. Then
And
one
so you're
day,
in the mid to late 80s here.
mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, before we go from there, did you have at this point a vision for where you'd be? Were you thinking, oh, one day I want to be editor in chief for PC Mag? Were you enjoying being a contributor? How did you think about your path ahead, if at all?
It really came to me in the weirdest way. So it turned out because I was a woman in a man's world, I was pretty good at media,
Okay.
and clearly I like to talk. So CBS hired me so I became editor of PC Magazine fairly quickly. I first became first looks editor, executive editor, and then CBS called and said, we're looking for somebody to contribute weekly. And so I became the CBS overnight person and the CBS This Morning person. So I would do like 2 segments some weeks about computers. But anyhow, it was all going great. PC Magazine was going great, but it was getting a little, how can I describe it? Just like operational. I could kind of do it in my sleep. And
Okay.
one day was giving a talk, and I held up a shiny disc called a CD-ROM. And I said,
Mm.
this is the future, at least for this moment. And, it's going to hold all this information. I was speaking to a bunch of kids people, and a guy from Disney was in the audience, and he said, we do Family Fun, which was a magazine of family fun. I'd like you to do Family PC, and it's about raising the first generation of digital kids. And I said, I love this idea. Love this idea. Love it more than PC Magazine, actually. So after, I don't know, 10 years of PC Magazine, I walked away and launched Family PC, joint venture, Disney and Ziff Davis.
Wow.
The same idea that we would test products, but we would use real families, ridiculously expensive. So we would send out 10 of each thing to real families who would then weigh in. And we really were inventing just a whole new way of talking to families who didn't really understand what their kids were doing, who were trying to understand why have a PC Junior was the big one at the time,
Oh yeah.
and then the Apple, of course, and that kind of changed everything. And anyhow, that lasted another 7 years. And then print magazines as we know them, got harder and harder to sustain. PC Magazine is now online.
Sure. So going back though, because you
Yeah.
were at that prescient age where you were seeing things as they were unfolding, and I think our journeys, you're slightly ahead of mine, but I was a Borland user. In fact, my cousin worked for Borland building Turbo Pascal. And into the 90s when all of those technologies really took over. When we think about the world we're in now and the world then, how I often say, using video games as the analogy, is if you showed me the modern video game and took me back in time to 1988 me while I was playing like Ultima 4 and said, this is the future, I probably would have said, no, that's impossible.
Yeah. Well, I learned quickly to say nothing's impossible, but I did learn lessons that change is the constant, and that and the best PC Magazine story was, so yeah, we're passing floppy disks with this magazine. I said, that is it. We are buying a LAN. We are buying a Novell LAN. And so we bought it. It kind of sat in the closet for months. And I said, guys, we bought this LAN, but it turns out a LAN is just a piece of equipment and some software. A process has to change to meet the new technology. So everything about this magazine had to change. The way a copy editor signed off, the way an image got put in. And that story has remained constant.
And you were the one pushing for that. You were the one seeing this technology's coming. We need to embrace it in the workplace.
The
Okay.
one
And how big was the organization at the time?
PC Magazine was like 150 people. It was like huge. I mean, we
Yeah.
just it was a real workhorse, and it started to get very real quickly that people's fortunes would be made or not based on what we the way we tested products, the way we documented. So we trained people. We gave the best training in the world. If you were a writer for us, you were taught to document everything, to call but not be infatuated with the vendor and their sales pitch, to document everything, because sometimes we were actually sued, like if you said something that was controversial at all. So we were really making history and kind of didn't know it. I'll give you another great story. So a guy walks into my office and he goes, this encyclopedia? And at that time we had CD-ROMs, and it was like, what was it? It was the Microsoft Expedia.
Encarta, I think.
Encarta. We had Encarta. And he goes, I think this is getting old, and I think we're all going to write the encyclopedia together. And he gives me this vision. So I say, just sit here for a minute. And I went in and I called Michael Miller and a few other people. And I said, this guy thinks like we're all going to group right. He's calling it Wikipedia, and he doesn't have and I don't think he has any money to his name, but like we should be listening to him. So you start to, I think, as you see so many products, you start to be able to see what's a winner, what has to happen, what's the next step. And so like all this AI stuff that we've been through, it's all great, but implementing it in your organization really takes thoughtfulness and not just turning the keys to the kingdom loose on typically a younger generation that maybe is unaware of IP, copyright, ethics, and good art. You remember when we first got fonts and desktop publishing, we made ransom notes. Everybody put in one of every font they ever liked. So there's that tendency that's human no matter what the technology is. We want to create with it, but we also have to put up guardrails, personal, organizational, governmental.
Couldn't agree more. I read a fascinating thing comparing the internet to television and the evolution of, TV has often been, especially these days, we look back like, can you believe there were only 3 channels, or the 7 words you don't say on the George Carlin bit, the 7 words you don't say on television. And I'll be honest, as much as I'm a power to the people, et cetera, person, I think we benefited tremendously by those limitations in the early days. And I understand this sort of desire to move faster than anyone can move that the modern tech world has. But I would also argue that not having the guardrails in place that we've had in prior evolutions is really concerning. But I want to take this story and bring it back to a different moment for a moment. Where were you professionally when the consumer internet, let's say 95-ish, was going? What were you still with Family PC? What were you doing at that time?
I was with Family PC, but we had a group. Remember, we were PC Magazine, Family PC, Yahoo, Internet Life, Corporate Computing. There were a lot of us.
Wait, you just said Yahoo. So I want to go to almost pre or the stage at the beginning of Yahoo. So you were within Ziff Davis when, again, we'll be facetious, the internet launched, right? A lot of different organizations, especially in publishing, didn't always respond to it that well. What was going on there at the time?
Yeah, so let me just say that PC Magazine, for the longest time, a bulletin board was a CompuServe bulletin board run on a 300 baud modem in some room. And when we wrote code in the magazine, you copied it, you typed it in, you know. So now that we're hearing the murmurings of this internet and HTML, and we all should learn this. And I have to say, in looking back, we were a little late to the party and a little late to understand the magnitude. So by that time, so the internet's happening. Yahoo Internet Life was built just to review internet sites in the context of life. Like, here
Sure.
are the new finance sites, here are the new, and Family PC was built to review good kids and family internet sites. And I remember calling my boss at Disney, like after a week, and saying, this internet thing is like exploding. We are never going to be able to review the whole thing. So we have to be a little more strategic. And same at Yahoo. So what that involved was thousands of corporate meetings of what our internet strategy should be like. And of course, there was a pecking order. Who would get it first was the biggest magazine in the stable, which was PC Magazine, which did get the internet first. The sadness was that Family PC was like the next online when it closed down. You know, it was
Ah,
shut down due to print falling. So there kind of is no, other than my closet, which has every issue we ever printed, there are very few records of Family PC Magazine, which is sad. I mean, there was life BC, you know, before internet and after internet, and they're two different beasts.
different worlds entirely. What happened next? Where did you land after Family PC? Because I really want to focus on this time for a moment and do us a favor, just roughly give us an age range. I don't like to put people on
Oh
the
my
spot for their
God.
age, but just where were you career wise? Were you
Yeah.
in your
So by now I had three children who are now in like junior high school. Magazines are going bust faster than anything. The trade centers collapsed. I mean, we were having issues. And I went to Yahoo, the company, Yahoo in Sunnyvale, and I actually worked for them as a freelancer writing journalism on the internet. And I have to say that journalism on the internet is a very different beast. There is no beginning and end. People just come in willy nilly wherever you are. I understood hyperlinking, I understood brevity, I understood how to get traffic. I didn't love how to get traffic because you got traffic by saying something. The more outlandish you would be, the more traffic you would get. And my job at Yahoo was kind of thankless. I had to put yourself here, I had to blog 3 times a day. It didn't matter if I was on vacation. I had to just stock them up ahead of time.
is
It
this
was
in the
brutal.
90s? Sorry,
Yeah,
Robin. Is that back in the 90s three
yeah,
times a day?
yeah,
Wow. So that's fairly early when we think about when social media really showed up.
yeah.
And so how long did you stay with that? Throughout the 90s?
Two
How
years.
long?
2 years. And then I had the luckiest break of my life. So I was on the side, I worked with the Consumer Electronics Show. Again, it goes back to accidental entrepreneur. I love the Consumer Electronics Show, love trade shows in general. And they liked working with me because I would come up with these wacky ideas. And one idea was called The Last Gadget Standing. And PC Magazine sponsored it. And it was sort of like the talent show, 10 products. They would do a little skit almost like a high school talent show. And the audience would vote with applause. I'm not kidding, not with computers or devices, but because it was applause, it was boisterous and people would bring their friends. My husband, who's an engineer, would rig the hall with sound meters. So imagine the Vegas Convention Center. We have sound meters. We measure applause, and the person with the loudest applause won.
What year was the first year you held it? Do you
Oh
remember?
God, I'm gonna
90s or 2000s?
2000s. And then Yahoo took it over, and they became the sponsor of it. And then finally, CES took it over because they really loved it. Though lines would go out the hall. And one year, Gary Shapiro, God bless him, who is president of the Consumer Technology Association, said, "We're going to Dubai. Why don't you come?" I went to Dubai with them and did The Last Gadget, which was kind of humorous because Dubai. Didn't know how it was going to go over, but it went well. And Gary and some folks at CES said, "What do you really want to do?" And I said, "I can't think I kind of like what you're doing better than this internet storytelling, because an event is more like a magazine. It has an end and a beginning and a narrative arc. And I think you guys have this great product, but it could use some organization." So for the next 15 years of my life, I built 15 products for CES: Kids at Play, Digital Money, Digital Health, Wearable Tech. And every year I would add a new one to their show floor.
So let's go back a little bit, though. The first Dubai event must have been in the teens, I would guess, just based on
Oh God,
when.
Ask my husband. Yeah, I'm like blanking out on time frame.
I'm going to go with roughly then, and here's why. Because I distinctly remember, I'm going to share our story for a moment, in 2005, where I'm working for Sling Media with the original Sling box.
That's right.
And I proceeded to not win Last Gadget Standing after winning every other thing we could possibly win. And it was the most vexing thing in the world to me, because at the time we were such this revolutionary product. There was nothing like it. And we launched the same year as Sonos launched, and they too weren't in Last Gadget Standing to the end. And I think we lost to a sound bar or something like that. And I remember this feeling like, don't get me wrong, soundbars are cool, but it's already 5-year-old tech and they're just going to keep getting better.
Yeah.
What are you guys talking? And then, we won the Best of CES show I think the next day. But even that wasn't our first time together. We had met back when you were doing the publishing work. Back
right.
in your
and you were Sling, but before you were Sling Media, you were
I was at another startup called Mediabolic. We were like Roku, but a decade too soon. But we built the first ever streaming media box, and I think that's when our paths originally crossed.
So that was 2015, you think? The 2005?
No, that's 2000. So Mediabolic was 99 to 04 for me personally, and then I went to Sling from 04 to 06. So that's when our worlds first started crossing. Now let's talk about that time for a moment. You're now with CES, or you're were you employed by the Consumer Electronics Association?
We had a partnership.
You had a partnership. I want to ask sort of the same question. So now you're sort of mid-arc, and were you like, was this the thing? Were you like, I want to do this for the rest of my life? Tell me what was going on for that.
It was the thing. It was finally, I found a way to tell stories, and I found out something about myself. So I used to be unhappy with myself because I felt like I didn't have any real talents, but connecting people, but finding people who had talent. And then I found out that finding people who had talent is a talent. So I became a connector of, and CES gave me that opportunity to say, here's your area called wearable tech. And I'd find like great products. And I said, come be part of this. Each part had a show floor and a conference. And then deals got done on the show floor, mergers and acquisitions. People became bigger, or they didn't, but they had a chance to tell their story. And I felt one of my real skills was coaching them on this story. So they're going, you know what? Think of yourselves as that person sitting in the audience. What problem are you solving for them? Forget about how cool your technology is. So we kind of built the properties that we built for CES based on that storytelling before its time. Each one, our digital health area had a little television station in the middle, had things going on all the time. Our Kids at Play, and we had Mommy Tech, which had a
I remember
TV
Mommy
station.
Tech.
So it was all about storytelling would convince people that the products really had a reason to be in their life. So it was products in the context of your life and not other way around.
I'm curious, was there any one CES in your memory that just like the one was there or a particular moment or product or event that just always brings you joy when you think about it?
It brings me joy. I'm not sure it brings CES joy. So I was really committed to, clearly I've mentioned being a woman, but I was also committed to CES not being so prudish about certain things. So I invited, what's his name? Ron Jeremy, the porn star, to talk about, at my family tech conference, to talk about why porn was perfectly fine. And if you, at that moment, the adult education show, the adult network
Nope.
show,
The Adult
adult,
Entertainment Expo.
Adult Entertainment Expo was co-located with CES. So you would go to the bathroom and just be filled with porn stars, and they had their porn movies going on, and then you had your tech guys, going on, and it was phenomenal. So
By the way, talk about a time where if social media existed more, like, could you imagine the TikToks at CES today where it'd be like porn star or gadget nerd or whatever, right?
exactly,
It would be
and
a totally different thing.
yeah, there was no social media, and so the best thing that could happen to a nerd from CES was they would get an invite to one of the porn star parties. But at any rate, I decided that it was important to me to have this discussion. Here are these porn people, and here are these nerd people, and Ron Jeremy turns out to be quite articulate about how porn is perfectly permissible for adults, but how do you create safe brown bags, safe age verification, and quite literate about it. So I invite him to talk, and at that point, I really didn't ask anybody's permission, and all of a sudden, my little mommy tech conference goes from a bunch of the 10 women who were at CES online to like thousands of guys stretching around and around. The fire marshals came, and it just got, it was like an amazing moment. And actually, I got a signed poster from Ron Jeremy, who was really good, and it was over. But I fast forward because the year after that, I argued that sexual digital health was quite far along by then, and it was actually very profitable and doing well. And I argued that your sexual health is just important as your other health, and that you shouldn't be putting either women's sex toys or men's sex toys in, not allowing them at the show, that they were legal in 50 states and all around the world, and
Sure.
it was time to, and I got a lot of shut up, but it finally happened. And so I do feel like I fought some battles for things I thought was right. On the flip side, when PC Magazine, going back in time, used to take CD-ROM X-rated discs, the whole back of the magazine were ads for porn discs. And I went down to my bosses and I said, if you ever want this to be a family magazine training the next generation of computer kids, you can't just fill the back with porn. And I actually learned that from a conversation I had with Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart said to me, you have to know your brand inside out and what you're about. And she said, notice I never have perfume ads in Martha Stewart Living. And I said, I really never noticed. She said, it's not, that's who, I'm not about that. And I said, she said, you shouldn't be about porn ads or beer or, and I went, really? I would take anything that would just advertise at this point, magazines are dying. She goes, you will never succeed that way. So the point is, to anybody thinking about that, building a brand, know that brand and who belongs with you, and have the courage to say who doesn't belong with you.
That's a great tip. It's funny because as well as I know you, you're not a brand person. That's not your essence, but it clearly runs so deep through what you do. Let's get a little more recent. Let's get into the teens. You're still doing the CES events.
I was also working for a couple of other smaller events. I would do Cosmoprof in Italy asked me to do beauty. I did Toy Fair. I did Toys and Kids, all driven by the passion. To me, tech is great in that context of life. So more
Yeah.
opportunities, I had to do it. So, but CES was by far my largest client. And then right before the pandemic, they offered to basically just said I was getting very big and that they would like to own this instead. And so I knew that it was time to leave. I just knew it. I mean, it was, and they were extremely generous. And so how old am I now? I'm now, oh God, I'm going to just say it. I'm probably 65, 66. God, now I got to figure out what I'm doing next. Like, what do I do?
So let me ask that question. You're 65, and that's an age for a lot of people where they might be looking at that maybe their last real career move. My dad, for example, was a dentist, and by 65, he was already starting to think about how he'd end up selling off his practice to retire. You were not thinking that at all. You were thinking, okay, let's go. What's next? It's right around the pandemic. What happened?
Yeah, no, if I were smart, I would have said, that's it, I'm done. But the pandemic, it was the pandemic. I literally finished my deal with CES in December of 2019, did the show still in 2020, came back from the show when there were little murmurings of this pandemic. And then we actually have a house upstate, and I locked myself in. That lasted like 2 weeks. I said, I'm going to go nuts. I don't have enough hobbies. I really have to build something else. And I saw that people needed virtual events. I mean, we were going into lockdown and nobody was going to travel anywhere. And I didn't know how long it was going to last, but I knew there were a new set of skills we were going to have to learn. So I put up a shingle that said the virtual events group, and I started doing the same thing I always do, putting things in buckets. If you're thinking of a movie making tool, this is what you need. An audio tool, this is what you need. If you're doing video conferencing, this is what you need. I started charging membership. I started having monthly meetings.
I want to go back to the starting point. For those listening who might see the things the same way you do, but not always know how to start. What was the first thing you actually did to get Virtual Events Group going?
So I kept my same team. And this is another tip. So when you hit it lucky and good things happen to you, you keep your team, you reward your team for being there with you. So I kept 2 people that I loved just because I said, I'm going to build something else, but I don't know what it is yet. And then I came up with this crazy virtual events thing. And then, of course, CES called and said, we're going to have to go virtual. Do you know anything about this? Matter of fact, I launched this new company called the Virtual Events Group. So again, I started to do virtual events for people, and it was really hard. It wasn't particularly, don't think it was financially lucrative. It was not. We muscled through, we paid the bills, but it was really, couldn't wait for live events. But here I am now, stuck with this title. Virtual Events actually has a lot of followers, newsletter readers. So now we are redoing it as a marketing site that says, we'll take care of all your events, virtual, hybrid, or physical. We are your virtual team. You don't have to hire us. You don't have to pay us. And fast forward, I now work for NAB. My company, I work for IFA in Berlin. I work for a couple of smaller shows, Silicon Valley Video Summit, Wall Street Video, shows that I love, Cosmoprof. And so now I'm kind of the event whisperer. I will come in, figure out how you can grow either your audience, your revenue, your exhibitor floor in new ways, and then help you do that.
So given that change, which is just a phenomenal thing to hear, when you look at the world through the lens you have today, not just the company you're running, but sort of you at this stage in life running a company, how do you define success?
I define more and more, I define success in how many people I can bring along and set them up for success. So I actually do have a plan. Like within 2 years, I will transition to more consulting, less like literally counting tablecloths and putting up. I mean, I will do whatever you have to do. I will tape things and bring signage, and and that's another thing for people. And you know this, coming from bigger companies and smaller companies, it's always good to think like a small company and know every. I was on a call this morning where they were teaching one of our partners how we use our back-end system. I said, I'm going to just come to this meeting just in case you all drop dead, and I, heaven forbid, would have to enter a speaker's name into the system. You just should know this stuff. And so I think this lifelong learning thing is amazing. And you talked before about 3 stations and choice. I think people now are hungry for what they've always been hungry for, which are shared moments where you can feel some connection. And I think we help people do that with events. And I think I've always had like ridiculous like sayings. Like when I was at PC Magazine, like my staff, and I had a lot of staff, and I would say, I don't care if some guy calls you with a dime, because there were payphones then, from downstairs and says he has the best invention, or somebody calls you from Microsoft and says, I'd like to take you to lunch, you listen to the guy with the dime too. That is as much your job as spotting the next generation of talent. And when you see enough of it, you get really good judgment about, no, this guy doesn't have the user interface, this guy doesn't have the infrastructure, this guy will get his seed funding, but I'll never get past that. This guy should sell. You just start to see it.
So why the guy with the dime? Why not just say, we'll wait for the calls from Microsoft? What was your ethos around that?
Because you discover winners, like Jimmy Wales, Wikipedia, like Corel. I remember Corel Draw. Like,
Oh boy.
again, it was a bunch of like guys from Canada who came in and said, no, thanks, we already have micrographics, but you go in and you see like a fundamental shift of when you saw, and like the AI wearables, let's take a modern day example that you see now kind of suck, but they won't forever. And so you have to be paying really close attention. So it was funny, I'm planning CES's, don't tell anybody, 2026 sessions now. And I called Google and I said, so we're not going to have a search bar by January. So what is going to happen? Because we're going to use a chat of some form, a Gen AI search. And what does that mean for advertisers? What does that mean for customers? So if you look at today and then you think about the obvious, it takes you to a place. So I know, and I don't even know who's on this panel yet, but I guarantee it's, what is search like in 2026? So I know the question, and now I have till January to figure out the answer. So part of it is being really good about thinking in advance but not too far in advance that you're like
Right.
a science fiction movie.
But I want to bring back, because I want to make sure I get this essence out of your thought process. You're doing a thing at the stage of your life where you have many, many choices. Why is this the thing?
I feel so lucky. So, I did corporate life, mostly at Ziff Davis and Yahoo. I feel so lucky that I can work anywhere, anytime. And I will, and my staff can tell you this, I will work from 11 till 2 in the morning so that I could go to the beach during the day. And I don't encourage them, so they have to earn the right to do the same thing. But I do encourage them to make tons of time for their personal life, that we have a privilege to work as creators of our own business. And as long as the work gets done, I don't care where they do it. But I encourage them to stay fresh. Like what we did last year doesn't work anymore. So I never want to hear, let's just pull out last year's thing.
I love that thinking. It's almost, there's two sides of that, both of which I sort of don't like the other mentality, which is, oh, we tried that and it doesn't work. I remember talking to a startup that we were talking about some mobile stuff, and they were asking about Sling and mobile, and I gave all these stories, and they sort of didn't get it. And I was like, well, wait a sec. It was 2007, right? It wasn't like today where, I don't even know what percentage of the world has an app store, right? So everything we thought of then was different. So if you were to try to make a decision on our experience with mobile in 2007, it's not worth anything, right? And I kind of find that people sometimes fall victim to that. This is how it was, so that's good, or this is how it wasn't, so that's good.
Yeah.
But you're not that way. What's the state of now?
But I think I'm up to take what was good about what didn't work and move it along, because it was good in every single failure. It's funny. So I've had tons of failures. So after Family PC closed, I'm leaving out whole chapters. I tried to sell it as a book. I tried to sell it as a magazine about teen life. So I am a narcissist. So it was always about me and my kids. So it was always about, I've got these kids. I'm going to write about them. And I think a lot about longevity now.
We live at a time where I think narcissism's off the charts. So I think by modern standards, you're no narcissist, my friend.
Right.
So,
thank you.
But you just opened an interesting door. Now, I happen to know that one of the people you work with today is your niece. How did that come to be?
Yeah, my children didn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. My son left CES the year I hired him and went to the porn stuff, and I nearly killed him. But it turned out, but no, it wasn't in their blood. My niece, it was in her blood. She's a people person. She's a listener. And actually, When you talk about life advice from all this stuff, I was not a listener. It was Scott Briggs from Ziff Davis when I had to switch from being editor to publisher because we were having financial difficulties. He said, the big difference is this magazine is not about you anymore. It's about your advertisers. And it's a cover to cover read to satisfy them. And you are solving their problems, not feeding your ego. And he was really mean to me. And it really helped me so much understand that if I'm doing a service in the media business at all, I am satisfying every part, the sponsor, the attendee, everybody.
And so, in that thinking, what did it take to actually start working with your niece? How did that happen?
So I had a team of 10 people when it was called Living in Digital Times is the name of the company.
I remember that one.
I had a team of 10, but we would staff up to like a team of 25 to get us through Vegas. And that went literally, if you could speak and get on the plane and carry stuff and you didn't care what you did, and we would assign you rooms. So she became very quickly competent of running. You could see she was super organized. So think about a trade show. You have the media assets, you have the headshots, you have to recognize the people, you have to get the speakers on stage, Mike. She was like really good at this stuff. And she understood and she listened to them. She said, this guy said it could have been better if we arranged the seating a little differently. This guy, had this complaint. Everybody has complaints. But she was smart enough to listen to them and then take it back. So she wasn't just phoning it in. And actually, before her, I had 3 excellent assistants also who've all gone on to greatness in their own lives. And I treasure every moment I spent with them. And with her, it will be different. I think she will take over this company. That is part of the plan. But because I did have other fantastic assistants. So I think that people, and I actually call her laughingly my AI agent, because as you get older, you remember less of everything that you said. And because we're juggling, 10 shows now.
Well, you opened up the topic that I want to bring us to as we look at the world ahead. You saw the shift to personal computers. You saw the shift to the home internet. You saw the shift to mobile. You were part of these shifts. You told those stories. We're now past the dawn of the AI age, or whatever we're going to end up calling this phase. What excites you about AI, given all that you've seen in tech?
I remain a tech optimist about all of this. Look, if you read yesterday's paper, yesterday's Wired, I think AI is better at diagnosing than my doctor is. Goes without saying, that one. Right? Look at farming, what we've learned about land, water use. And as I watch my kids, one of my children's in the glamping business. And so you have to know a lot about land. So you need a lot of LLMs, like tell you where the floods are, where the soil's heavy, what the seepage is. Like, you can come to decisions that are so much better informed so quickly. The downside is, and the part I feel really bad about, and I just wrote this, that the class of 2025 is at a serious limitation, the graduating class. They did not study AI in school. They're kind of like, whoa, they have the pandemic. They've got a world that's kind of crumbling. But so I wrote my prescriptive advice to them. I said, when it has hobbies in your resume, write ChatGPT, because an AI is reading your resume. Like, think about it like that. So you have got to prove to them that even though you weren't formally trained, you know this stuff. I did it. I didn't know it. There weren't computers. There wasn't any of these things. I had a great boss that would just say to me, just swagger. And it's
like that. I think that's so right. I mean, my first real out of college job was building websites for companies, because I learned HTML and then I started learning Perl scripts and I started learning whatever I had to learn next. And I could call myself an expert. I would, in that time, I would have had hobby HTML or whatever. So I think, Robin, your words are so salient. What's your favorite AI tech that you personally are using these days?
I shift between the Perplexities, the ChatGPTs. We cut up all our video clips using video editing. I do floor plans but I still have to say, at the end of the day, I still like my personal touch, and I haven't figured out. Right now, I'm trying to build a chatbot of myself, so when you come on the website, you can see me. It's really hard.
It's really hard. And by the way, I like the way you're thinking about that. I think very, very similarly, like anybody out there right now, human in the loop, right? Must have, right? In Augie, and I know you use a lot of different tech, and you've tried Augie in the past. We think we actually, when you make a project in our platform, we deliberately tell you this needs to be edited. And I think so many people just grab whatever the AI gave them and just dump it out there.
Yeah, yeah, grab it. Don't think about, prompt is show me a guy drinking a can of Coke at a picnic table. Well, that's a copyright infringement. Whether humans produce, what does attribution look like? There are so many questions to answer. Well, I'm discouraged that these kids had a rough go of it. The flip side is look at the job titles on LinkedIn. Did your guidance counselor ever tell you you could be an evangelist as a living, or a community builder? I think corporations are starting to understand the need for authenticity, for talent, for content. While publishing that I knew with magazines may never come back the way it was. Washington Post has a TikToker now. She's fabulous. She makes TikToks about the Washington Post. And she told me the funniest joke. She said, when I got this job, my friend said to me, is Washington a guy that posts?
Oh my.
I mean, so there's this generation gap, but you can laugh about it and kind of have fun with it. So, I'm as lame about computer games when I say to my grandkids, I go, look at that nice gorilla's trying to hug me. He goes, not trying to hug you, trying to kill you.
Right.
But then I can say to them, no, you can't do that and call it homework. Like, that is just wrong. Ethan Allen did not make furniture. He was in the Revolutionary War,
Right.
get your facts right. And so, I think we have a lot to learn. And I think it's a super exciting time if we harness AI ethically and responsibly.
Wonderful. Robin, where do you want to send people to go look at something interesting?
Yeah, you can keep up with me best on my LinkedIn page. Just type in Robin Raskin. Our site is virtualeventsgroup.org, virtualeventsgroup.org. It is under reconstruction, but we're pretty excited about what it will be. And Jeremy, I can't thank you enough for making me feel important and old at the same time. That's really hard.
Well, I certainly wanted to make you feel important. I certainly can't have any comment on the latter because you aren't in my eyes. And I love our journeys together and how our paths keep crossing. I really had no idea despite all the time we spent, you have so many amazing stories. And thank you so much for taking the time to share them. Thanks so much, Robin. Have a great day.
You got it. Good talking to you.